Hello, everyone. Adrian Sanabria here again, Senior Research Engineer at Cyber Risk Alliance and co-host of Enterprise Security Weekly. Thank you for joining us for another installment of SE Media's In Focus. These interviews feature some of the top thought leaders in the cybersecurity space. This is an opportunity for those experts to share hindsight on recent events and foresight on where you should be focused as a cybersecurity professional today and in the near future. Joining me today again is Derek Manky, the Chief of Security Insights and Global Threat Alliances at Fortinet's FortiGuard Labs. Derek, it's a pleasure to chat with you again. How are you doing?
Yeah, we had a great, always great conversations with you. I'm doing very well. How about you, Adrian?
Yeah, doing pretty good. Took a mini vacation for the first time in a while. So, getting back to normal a little bit.
We all need a little bit of that break in our industry, for sure.
Yeah.
We can get it.
Yep, definitely. It's during the pandemic, it's been really easy to just pour yourself into work, especially when you're working from home and the office is right there around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, speaking of kind of abnormal times, this year it seems like things have just been progressively getting bigger, broader, more unexpected with some of the attacks that we've been seeing. Is it just the current lens we're looking through here, or attacks at this point kind of unprecedented? Are we seeing bigger, crazier, more unique attacks these days?
I would say, there's some aspects that are still ongoing that we've always seen. There's always that, I would say. Like we still see a tremendous amount of volume for your typical, automated phishing scams and attempts and things. We talked about the whole COVID-19 lure that was well over a year. That's actually died down now. So there's always going to be that. But in terms of the level of sophistication and this, we're definitely seeing a new trend, I would say. Absolutely. Things that are unprecedented. And I think, Adrian, it's a direct result of this. It's not a secret, obviously, but this whole idea and, well, this whole documented research that we've done of cybercrime, being prolific, right? It's a lot of these organizations behind ransomware attacks this year. There's not just like a new criminal enterprise that spun up this year, right? They've been around for a while and they've been making money for a while and they've been getting deeper pockets. And so that's why we're seeing this. I think we're seeing more sophistication in terms of the attacks. Really, the way I look at it, it's a blend between, it's blurring those lines between APT and nation state attacks and cybercrime. Like it's, that sophistication, right? Use of 0 days, that sort of stuff is usually on the APT side of the house, but now we're seeing that more starting to happen on the cybercrime.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned earlier in Focus is that, maybe a decade ago, like we used to tell people, yeah, you're not a target. You don't have to worry about like this APT type stuff is just way, they're not looking at you. You're not that interesting. And now, I would never say that. These techniques have filtered down. They've got this system where they've kind of mixed opportunistic methods, correct me if I'm wrong here, with these more sophisticated techniques. So they're not necessarily going out and saying, I'm going to go after this particular organization. They're saying, hey, what can we get into? And then, that's kind of like a menu for them to choose from. Is that correct?
Yeah. And if you look at just the way, like talking about ransomware specifically, the way that they're becoming more, especially in their minds, business oriented, mm-hmm. if we shall say, and exactly going on the opportunities. They're even upfront in their communications with their quote unquote clients or victims.
Yeah, clients are providing a service.
Right. Yeah. But they're very upfront, even they're very direct in these communications. It's been well documented, right? Where they're going and saying that, hey, this is a business to us, right? We don't care about your customers or the impact. We care about getting our money, and that's that, right? And we're going to give you a good service, right? And to make that transaction happen. and sort of get it over with quickly. So that to them, I would say they clearly see the opportunities. That's what they're very good at. They're executing on it. That's why they're, unfortunately, in most cases so far, being successful on, with their attacks. And clearly, I think that needs to change. But it's a trend. It's a trend. Unfortunately, we say this all the time, but it's a trend going in the wrong direction. And but you're right. I think it's to that point because it was, these targeted attacks were reserved for, it was a smaller attack surface, if you will. Now there's way more organizations at stake. So,
yeah, it seems to me the argument that oh, nobody cares about us, is just completely, fallen away. Like if you've got money in the bank, or if somebody perceives that you've got the money to pay extortion, you're a target.
Yep. And what we're also seeing is this collateral damage that's happening as well too, right? So you have the targets, but you have people that are non-targeted that still get impacted in various ways, and that's also a big issue too.
Yeah, I think NotPetya is probably the classic example of that, where clearly, Ukrainian businesses were the target, but then, software vendors in the US and shipping companies in China and Denmark, get taken down by this thing.
Yeah, and of course, I know that there's a lot of, especially in the operational technology field, that's always scary. And I think people are waking up to this now, right? It's becoming more front of mind. So that's a trend in the good direction, just because these have been happening. I mean, we saw last year, of course, a case of, patient being diverted from a hospital and dying as a result of a, health sector attack. And obviously this year there was the, Colonial Pipeline attacks as well, which went right down to consumers too.
So you mentioned them operating as a business. Let's go down that path a little bit. So ransomware as a service is now a big thing, right? Like I think a lot of people, when they see this, especially the attribution in the media, they think of the ransomware crew as just a single crew that's going out and saying, I'm going to go attack this company.
Right. Yeah.
But that's not the case, right?
No. So I've been following this for, well over 10, 15 years, and it continues to evolve. I remember doing one of my first ransomware talks at Sector Security Conference in Toronto in 2010. It was called "All Your Data Are Belong to Us."
Yeah, that was the meme back then, right?
Yeah, this is when they were just going off of the fake antivirus software model, which was not forceful. Of course, people, sometimes paid for this fake solution, but obviously the conversion rate wasn't that good. But even back then, they had partner cup programs, which were affiliate programs, and they would pay a commission. It was much smaller back then. I believe 5 to 10% if someone paid for this fake software. That started to evolve even into some of the botnet models, like Zero Access was one of them, where, hey, we'll pay you to grow our botnet and we'll give you a little bit of a commission for that. So it's this whole crime as a service, really, right? The crime as a service model, and it's what it ends up being is it's criminal enterprise again, right? This is cybercrime. It's not one entity. You have literally the evil bank, if you will, in this case. They're the cash cow. They have all the deep pockets and fundings. They sign up partners to their programs. They have full-blown report panels showing all the different partners, how much money they're making. It's like a leaderboard, right? So they encourage that, and they advertise that on their forums, because they create competition effectively that way. And that's been going on for over 10 years. But again, it used to be for these smaller ransom plays for botnets and things like that. Now, instead of things like that, we're dealing with these 7-figure ransom payments and high commission rates, right? 50% plus. But again, it's not just, you sort of have this, evil corporation, if you will, the criminal enterprise, and then you have multiple partners that are signing up, right? If they sign up to get access to the platform, they use that tool to launch their own attacks. And again, they're opportunistic. They're like, they don't care if you had OT or healthcare or whatever, pick your target, we'll pay you if you're successful.
Yeah. And it does make me wonder, if at this point, they're so organized or running as a business, if it's going to be, technology that eventually brings us down, or if it's going to be lawyers and law enforcement, and more, tackling it like a more traditional criminal enterprise, right?
Yeah, there's no silver bullet. I think there's a lot of wheels in motion that need to happen. There's the whole education front. Like going back to what you said, you wouldn't tell anyone that they're not a target now, because they are. I think people need to know that. They need, obviously with ransomware, especially, there's so much planning and preparation, proactiveness that needs to be done. That goes a long way. But then there's the lawyer piece too, right? But we should definitely be on that left of boom, as we call, on the left side, on the preventative side, because it's much more unclear on the other side. There's of course a lot of efforts we're involved with. We work with law enforcement regularly, and there are paths we can do, but it's not always a guarantee, and it takes a long time. Going back to, if we look at the JBS attack that happened this year, some funds were or sorry, it's Colonial. So some funds were recovered, and that doesn't always happen. That's very rare.
Right. That was very interesting.
Yeah, you can't rely on that, is what I'm saying, right? I mean, it's obviously a good thing, but we just can't rely on that. It has to be a lot more on that left of boom, the early cycles of the attacks.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's interesting talking about left of boom. I saw somebody ask the other day, hey, does anybody have any examples of ransomware attacks being stopped, after boom, but before they did any damages? And it was just crickets. I'm sure it has happened and people can't talk about it, and, I think detective controls, and of course recovery are super important, but I do wonder, how much we can depend on detecting them in time and containing, kicking them out, rather than just stopping it from the beginning.
Yeah, if we talk about the boom being the actual execution of the ransom, i.e. encrypting the data, it's game over at that point usually. Or, well, encrypting and exfiltration, right? If they, because a lot of this is extortion now, where they're threatening to release things publicly or sell data. Of course, at that point in time, when the data is exfiltrated, then it's in their hands, and it's essentially I would say game over, but it's compromised at the time. The damage has been done. Whereas if it's a denial of service, like crippling systems, the quicker the incident response is integrated, that's a whole knock, sock, business, continuity planning, all that stuff that could be done quicker, I think. So it really depends on the cases, but yeah, I mean, that's one of the tough things of the ransom models, of course, is when they're using strong cryptography, and they're offering that as a service now too, right? They know that with their cryptographic methods, and they're selling keys for big money.
Yeah. So talking about going back to collateral damage, here recently we've seen a bunch of supermarket shops in Sweden have to shut down, not because their third party was compromised, but because a third party of their third party got compromised, and that was happened to be their POS system vendor. And it still shut them down, even though, like, let's say they did all their due diligence, had all their stuff in place, they didn't have a breach, but because a key vendor of theirs did, I guess it becomes, for them, it's more of a business continuity question. But still, it's that kind of collateral damage. How should we be preparing for that kind of thing and looking at that? Is that even something that we can prepare for?
Yeah, I think that it is something that we can prepare for sure. It's the same. It's the same idea, but it's a force multiplier, right? It's a much larger scale. I mean, this comes mostly on the incident response planning, because a lot of these cases, if they're hitting, managed security, MSSPs as an example, the end users often don't have maybe control or an idea of security of their own SOC, as an example, their own incident response plan. So there's a lot of dependencies, right? And I think that's the key, is really trying to enforce those dependencies channels. Who do you call? How do you respond? Because it's not just one person that's going to be looking for guidance. It's going to be hundreds in some cases. So that's a new trend, right? That's something I think that needs to be addressed at a larger scale. I think the good news is, some of it's manual right now, but we are seeing that when some of these, attacks happen, that it's all hands on deck in a sense, right? Industry players get involved, law enforcement gets involved. The affected organizations are also working with their third parties. They're very willing to do that. Frankly, they have to, I think, but they're willing to do that, which is a good thing. But again, focusing on how you can do that quicker and have the tools and all of that, I think is really really important.
Yeah, and maybe it's that certain vendors are looking at blast radius for a particular vendor like an MSP, maybe need to be held to higher standards, and we need to kind of develop those standards. When one company can affect 10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's very similar to, I mean, a lot of people talk about these as supply chain attacks. That's to me a gray area. There's different ways to look at this, different lenses, right? Certainly it can affect supply chain if you're talking about attacks that take down operational technology and things like that, that literally affects a physical supply chain. But if you look at this chain of impact, the collateral damage, that's really what we're seeing in these cases. And again, that is a new trend, and I think something that we absolutely have to really put in focus. If we talk about vulnerabilities and exploits, right? It's a similar idea. If we look back to Heartbleed and shell shock, these it's integration of security stack that is then sent to all these different platforms, and that's that whole conversation is about patch management, right? And because there's all these different forks and branches of the software, and I think, again, realizing the install base and the impacted base and how to respond to that, it's all the same idea, but it's a new angle to it.
Yeah. So speaking of kind of maybe what vendors can do to help here, sharing information, sharing threat intel, stuff like that. I'm been told that you're doing some stuff with the Center for Threat Informed Defense, CTID, which I'm not terribly familiar with. If you could kind of, clue me in on what's going on with them. And sounds like it's attached to MITRE, which is doing a lot of exciting stuff for the industry recently.
Yeah, I absolutely love MITRE. And we actually have a long standing relationship with MITRE. We were working with them back 10 years ago when they actually first developed Sticks and Taxi, which got passed to OASIS for ratification. But as you know, Sticks and Taxi are like a gold standard in the industry now for threat intelligence sharing. So that was just, one great project from the past. And then of course it was MITRE ATT&CK. Now there's actually, so MITRE has started MITRE Ingenuity, which launched the CTID, Center for Threat Informed Defense. We're a research sponsor with them, so we're actively engaged with other members in the center. And this is a innovation center, right? So, they realize, hey, MITRE's done a lot of good work with Sticks, Taxi, and ATT&CK, but there's much more that can be done, and they wanted to reach out to other research partners, which they've done, and there's well over 20 different projects that are going on in the center. So it's not just about ATT&CK. I mean, yeah, ATT&CK is great, and there's a lot of different sort of micro projects related to ATT&CK. Like we're involved in a sightings ecosystem, so that's about how do we report on with FortiGuard Labs and real-time data on TTP profiles, techniques, tactics, procedures. So in other words, how are attackers moving, right? How are they trying to evade security detections, all that sort of stuff. We can literally see that in real time and report on that. It's one project. There's other projects like Attack Flow, which looks at sequencing, right? So statistically, how are attackers actually moving through networks? That whole left of boom concept we're talking about, right? I think the more we understand that, the more we can actually build proper defenses. Of course, that's the whole idea behind this. But it's instead of just MITRE, now you have all these great research groups and engineers and researchers that are getting together. And there's so many different possibilities in there. There's deception plays. You talked about that boom concept. I think deception is a key technology in that. That's the whole idea of the hackers are going in and they're detonating, they're booming, but they're hitting the wrong targets, which is a good thing, obviously, right? So there's that. And then of course there's other things that MITRE's doing, like the attack evaluations, which we're part of, and then also the Shield project too.
Yeah, definitely interesting stuff. Seeing them actually putting hands on products, testing them out, stuff like that. Yeah, and I think it's super important that we've gotten to this point where we're actually understanding the attacks, because oftentimes the details of attacks don't make it to the public. You know, companies aren't required to disclose that stuff, and yeah, every now and then they are, and it's just super valuable to understand exactly where mistakes were made. But on that topic, you know, and just to wrap up this conversation, you know, are you seeing any positive things that defenders are doing, you know, or if not, you know, what should folks be doing and focusing on right now, given limited resources and time?
So the positive things I'm seeing are, as I said earlier, this sort of all hands model where when attacks are happening, it's all out there sort of on the table, which needs to be done, but it's happening, right? And you got forensics involved, law enforcement, the security community is talking about it, they're sharing notes and details of what they can. That's a good thing, right? I think we need to do more of that proactively, and that's happening. If you look at Cyber Threat Alliance, we're doing early sharing of data. That trust model in the security community and the private sector has been building for a while, which is good. It's now being built also in the public to private sector, which is a fantastic thing. So those are all good trends, things that need to be, calls to action we've been saying for a while, but we're seeing it happening now. So that's good. And then, yeah, I think the other piece is the other good thing is the education, right? I mean, it took, I don't know how long, 10 years for people to start being aware of, 419 scams as an example.
Yeah.
But now I think for these more sophisticated attacks, people are starting to build a consciousness towards that, right? To understand that these attacks are happening. And that goes a long way, right? Because that gets all into well, this is a real threat. What can I do? That's the mentality that needs to change, but it's starting to, I would say.
I would totally agree with that. I think it's now a regular topic in the boardroom. It's a regular topic in the press, and we now have that framework for, spreading that information about new scams and new things fairly quickly within the organization, right?
Yeah.
Well, awesome. I think it's a great positive point to end on. So with that, we've been talking to Derek Manky with Fortinet's FortiGuard Labs. Derek, thank you for being in focus with us today.
Thank you so much. Always great chatting.